You're my oldest friend, not just in age, but in time that we know each other. So I think we were 16 when we met. I was 16, you were 17.
Yeah, exactly.
So we were frisky teenagers.
You can say that again.
And the reason I asked you to come, not only because I love you dearly and you're such a special person, but the experience we had as teenagers was very specific to a time that was very funny and entertaining. But I think that there's a timeless experience that teenagers have, and you wonder if they're going to come out the other end okay. So teenagers get into things, and then some come out okay, and some go in different paths. I will start by saying, survived some really crazy stuff. Neither one of us ever drank or took a drug in our lives, and we probably were surrounded a good part of our time by some really way out people. And it's fascinating and amazing that we still are good friends and we still haven't taken a drug or a drink, no matter what group we're in or what situation we're in. So the reason I've asked you to come is because I think that experience we had together was unique and interesting, but it also reflects what all teenagers go through, and that journey really can define the rest of their lives.
For sure.
So what's your first question?
My first question is, I don't remember how we met or who introduced us. And there were two people that I remember that we were both very friendly with. So I was going to ask, do you remember how we met?
Not really. I can assume, but I'm not 100% sure.
I remember it was 1961.
Oh my God.
I remember that you either just graduated from high school and you were about to embark on your FIT experience. And I know you always had a sketch pad in your hand, no matter what age you were. And I know you wanted to be a painter. The question I have as it relates to a 16-year-old kid hanging out in a place called the Wagon Wheel and the Peppermint Lounge is, how the hell did you get in it? How did you get in? So,
first of all, do you want to explain the Peppermint Lounge and the Wagon Wheel, what they were? I think that if the Peppermint Lounge can be best described to this audience as the place where the twist was born. And the twist was a very popular dance, chubby checker, and, come on, baby, let's do the
Joey
twist.
D
and Joey D and the Starlighters. So the twist was the rage. And the Peppermint Lounge was the precursor to Studio 54. It was the place every socialite, celebrity, anybody who was anybody had to go to. And the Wagon Wheel was sort of like, I don't know.
The place where the people who couldn't get into the Peppermint Lounge would end up.
Right, which was sort of like a blues club.
Yeah, it was.
And very funky.
To say the least.
Yeah, so the question was, how did I end up there? Well, I had a very isolated childhood. I lived in Yorkville, which was an Irish Catholic neighborhood. We never left the neighborhood. We always stayed together. My venture out was to Washington Irving High School when I finally picked a high school. And at Washington Irving, I met a girl who said, do you want to go to the Peppermint Lounge? And I didn't even know what it was. But her father was somehow involved, let's say, in the background. And we would get in, and we were, I was 16, 1961. And so we would just get in, And we danced constantly.
8 hours.
We danced straight with water, and that was it.
You never stopped.
Never stopped.
Great dancer, by the way.
Well, I would sew my pants on me because I didn't know how to put a zipper in. So drinking a lot of water and dancing.
Oh, sure.
Seam ripper. I had a seam ripper with me, and I would sew myself in and out of the pants every time I went to the bathroom.
It was great. I mean, it was unbelievable. I just said to myself, how does a 16-year-old girl get into this place? Not to mention, how does a 17-year-old boy
Well, how
get
did
into
you? I mean, you were from
I had
New
fake
Jersey.
ID, just like everybody else. I lied. And I remember the owner of the Wagon Wheel was extremely fond of me. A guy, I can't mention his name, but he was very fond of me. And his wife was even more fond of me. And they let me in, and I did what you did. I didn't. The only dance I ever did in my life was the twist.
Yeah, I
It's
don't
the
remember.
last-
Yeah, I don't remember you dancing.
Well, I did dance. I was a hot ticket back in the day, but that was when dancing ended for me.
Yeah, yeah.
But I don't know. Do you ever hear from this person that you went to?
No,
Nothing.
nothing. And the interesting thing is that period of time was the first time I really met people outside of my neighborhood, and it as we can describe, and you can describe better than I, the street was 45th Street between 6th and 7th Avenue.
Right.
So it's in the middle of,
The
oh
world.
my God, right? And it could be the worst of New York at that time. But there was this entertainment aspect of what was going on there, and the music and the dancing and the costumes on the dancers at the Peppermint Lounge were so appealing to me that I was mesmerized by it.
So do you think that helped attract you to what you are today?
I think there's an aspect of it that has. So I remember the Peppermint Lounge had live band.
Mm-hmm.
So Joey D and the Starlighters, who later became the Young Rascals, had a song, The Twist, and they were the house band, and they were amazing.
The Peppermint Twist?
Yeah, and they were amazing. And so they would have a show with amazing dancers who
yeah.
choreographed these fantastic routines. And I've always loved dance, and I've always been attracted to dancers and routines. And I remember vividly, the girls wore these two-piece fringe outfits, red, and they would shimmy and do the twist in those outfits. And to this day, there are always fringe pieces on my collection. I don't care if it's the trend, the fashion, anything. Those fringe pieces are just, I look at fringe and I think, have a good time. You are going to have a good time in that outfit. And the dancers were such a big part of the whole act there, right?
You know, it's interesting because there's a show on TV today called The Deuce. I don't know. I can't watch it because it's just not a show that I can. There's some bad stuff in it, but it reminds me. And it was shot at that particular time, and you could really see what you and I were in.
And we didn't know.
And we didn't know.
Yeah.
And the only thing I can think of as far as you're concerned is what was protecting you, or what gave you the sensibility to be careful. And I had in my notes, I had parentheses, mom, because your mother was such a powerful force, such a force. I mean, she made Star Wars look very weak. And I was blessed because she actually liked me.
Oh,
I think
she loved you.
I think I was one of the few people that she really did like.
But you actually, I would have to, during the summer and weekends, I could stay out till midnight. But obviously during school nights, I I wouldn't go.
Right.
But I remember you many times making sure I left 45th Street before midnight. It was like,
That was my job.
Go home. And then I would often think like, well, what's Vinny going to do now? Like, is he going to be okay? But I was never afraid. Were you ever afraid?
Never.
We were too stupid to be afraid.
Too stupid to be afraid. Had no idea. And we were surrounded by nice people.
Well,
some.
but describe what we were surrounded by.
I wrote a little list. Prostitutes, drug addicts, drug dealers, murderers, thieves, male hustlers, female hustlers. And I think that probably covers the gamut.
And stuff that you can't even imagine because it was so dark.
It was so
there
dark.
There was darkness.
There was a feeling that I had, anyway, that the people that we knew had this sort of leave these two alone.
They did.
Because they're good kids. We don't want them to be like we are.
They did.
And, it was very helpful. I mean, the question I had when you snuck into your house at 12:30, 1 o'clock, was Mom sitting on the chair waiting you in the kitchen?
So my mother, as you described, was a force. She was just an incredible power. And I wasn't afraid of her as much as I didn't want to disappoint her.
Yeah.
And because she would make you feel so bad. And
she had the gift.
She was just unbelievable. And I think because she liked you so much, she felt that you were a decent guy and that you were probably the kind of people I was hanging around with. Little did she know. And so I remember sketching you. So I was desperate to sketch human beings because I was studying anatomy and I wanted to be a painter. I wanted to be Michelangelina. And I was just, I need human beings. I need to sketch human beings. So I remember begging you, please, Vinny, let me sketch you. So we were in my bedroom in the 4x4 apartment, and my bedroom was 1x1. And I remember you sitting on a stool one day, and I'm sketching you, and you were sweating, and I kept saying, "Are you okay, Vinny? Are you okay?" And then you just fainted.
Yeah.
You just fainted and fell over.
I collapsed. Quick, Mom.
My mother just was so aware of your kindness and just what a great guy you were, that I don't think she knew I would see you, so I don't think she understood the depth of what was going on. And then the Metropole Cafe, which was there for a long time, I don't know if it's still there,
it's
on
not there
Broadway
anymore, no.
or 7, was this sleazy place, but the guys from not the Rascals, but
the drummer, Dino.
Dino would go there, and Gene Krupa would give him lessons.
Yeah, I remember.
So Kathy and I would go. I think she and Dino were seen. I don't know what the story was, but I knew there was a reason we were going there.
Right.
And I remember sitting there thinking, and there were some women who were very extrovert in their behavior were there. And I remember thinking all of this is so different and new. I didn't know how to put it in perspective with my childhood and the way I was brought up. So I kind of just didn't judge it. But I knew that seeing Gene Krupa and understanding, because my brother was practicing drums and everything, that this was really something special that was happening. But I also was aware that there was darkness and strange stuff going on. Well, and it was definitely edgy.
Definitely edgy. There was one fairly famous person who came out of Hollywood who I think got their start dancing at the Metropole. Am I allowed to say who it is?
Yeah.
Goldie Hawn danced
really?
at the Metropole.
Well, I mean, I can see that, but I also see that she's a survivor.
Oh,
and
yeah,
she
yeah,
was
big time.
probably like us, like, oh, this is fun and this is a great opportunity, but not really until later understanding the depth of the darkness there.
Putting it, you and I having a very casual conversation about those times can't give anyone any idea, unless they were there as well, just what it was like. It was, and I don't want to paint a too dark a picture either, because it was wonderful.
Yeah.
It was great. And I think that you and I, especially you, in terms of your ability to survive the world you're in now, was probably helped by those
Survival
times.
skills, yeah. Well, we should talk about some of the people that went to the Peppermint Lounge that were famous. I mean, the Kennedys.
They all went there. I mean,
every socialite and celebrity of the time. Just
Absolutely.
the same kind of people that went to Studio 54 went there. Remember when the Beatles came to Studio 54?
I played Monopoly with Ringo Starr.
Yeah, and so they were at the Peppermint Lounge because it was the place to see and the girl dancers were dating the whoever, and
whoever.
it was it was really energetic and positive in so many ways, because there was this creativity and excitement for the time. But it definitely, I mean, if people were talking about mafia or any of that culture was pervasive in that time.
For
And
sure.
the personality of it, which was also very sexy and appealing, the charm of guys that had that swagger was really, like, it was very evident. You saw it everywhere, but they were always on the edge of being arrested or getting shot or
being dead.
What happened to your leg? Oh, I got stabbed by a knife. And I'm like, oh my God.
I remember John Lennon was at the headliner, there were three places: the Wagon Wheel, the Pep,
and the headliner.
43rd Street, right off
by the
8th.
New York Times, in the New York Times
Exactly.
building.
He came in, and it was a controlled restaurant, controlled club, and there were some wise guys that were in the place, and John Lennon made a comment about one of the wise guys' wives or girlfriends, and they were going to kill him.
No, I have no doubt. I remember going to the headliner because they had great bands, and if the show was on, so Kathy and I were the in-between dancers. They had dancers that danced in between the shows.
I remember
so
that.
we took pride in being the in-between dancers, and I have to describe my getup. My hair took me at least an hour and a half to do hair and makeup, and my hair was maybe a foot tall? Yeah, I would tease it. The two of us would tease our hair into curls, and we would check the back of each of our heads to make sure there were no holes or openings. And so I had the hair going, lashes, my skin-tight pants, and when the in-between dancers there was a show on, we had some time, we would go to the headliner to see the bands there. And I remember the first time I saw an all-girl band, and they may be one of the few all-girl bands at the time. I didn't know of any others, and it was Goldie and the Gingerbreads.
Goldie Zelkowitz.
And they were so great. They were very hot and sexy and very, very, they were good too. And they really talk about competing in a man's world.
Yeah, right.
They really, really had, it's Mad Men time, 1961.
61.
So women are not getting respect. And here are these babes banging at the drums, playing sax, doing all of this. And it was really so exciting to see. And I was also playing saxophone at the time at school. And I was taking private lessons. I played saxophone and clarinet. And I remember the sax player was sick or something, and they had a performance, and Kathy tells them, well, Norma plays saxophone. And there was that moment in time where they looked at me like, do you want to? And I intuitively knew no,
That's Mom.
no, you don't want to do that. And my life could have taken such a turn, but I just like, oh, no, I don't think so. I'm not going to do that.
I still remember their theme song, Goldie and the Gingerbreads. Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, my God.
I wonder if any of them are around. I think that they have such a great story. They were really...
I think she was from Queens.
They were so fantastic, and they were such leaders. And we talk about feminists, and we talk about women who do breakthroughs, but this is a group of women who were
on the road,
so brave to say, we're going to do this, and they probably never got credit their entire lives, because it was during a period where you didn't recognize that they were tolerated, but they weren't respected. And so Kathy and I just were their big fans, and we would just, scream and yell and make sure
the drummer liked me.
The
Bonnie,
drummer,
I think her name was Bonnie.
Yeah, the
Bonnie.
drummer was gorgeous.
Yeah, she was a pretty girl.
I always remember her wearing low-cut tops, but everybody wore low-cut tops.
Yeah, really.
And what was the other band, the other girl group? Ronnie, the Ronettes.
The Ronettes.
They were always there. They were always at Peppermint Lounge. They were so great.
Yeah.
So the Ronettes started there, and they were really terrific.
Well, I remember Frank Vincent, who is you see him in every wise guy movie. He was in Goodfellas. He gets killed, I think, in every movie that he's in. He was in a band. Bobby J, I think the name of the guy was. And Bobby J was in a wheelchair. He was handicapped. And I remember Frank Vincent was part of his group. But that was a wagon wheel band. They didn't work the Peppermint Lounge.
I loved the wagon wheel music. I think that's why I love blues so much. That raunchy, low down, really, really. And Ray Charles was such a
and he was there.
He was there.
Yeah, he was there.
I mean, my go-to songs at karaoke, Ray Charles, Etta James. Of course, I could never do Etta James, but I love Ray Charles. I remember the sawdust on the floor. I remember just the heat of that place was just so intense.
That was my first restaurant club job. I was the hat check boy there.
Are you serious? Why don't I remember that?
Yeah, I used to check coats for a woman who was a waitress, Irene Shabrowski, who was about 6'9", and she had her eyes on me, and she put me in the coat room because she felt that I'm the only person she could trust.
That is so funny.
Yeah, it was wild.
The other thing I remember was at the time, I don't know if you went to these, but there were all the rock and roll shows, right? Like at the Brooklyn Fox and everywhere.
Sure.
And so because we were in between dancers, we were invited to go to the Brooklyn Fox things and dance.
Right.
And so Kathy and I were like, we're on it. We're there. And I remember standing backstage and standing next to Smokey Robinson and all of these people and thinking, oh my God, how did I get here? What is this? So it was just seeing those rock and roll shows up close and all of those performers and thinking, this is truly magic. This is, how did I end up in this place?
And that's what I mean, to have experienced that and come out okay.
On the other end.
Is a pretty special, we are special, Norma, you and
I think about every time we see each other, we laugh at how close we came so many times. It was really, really something.
How many of them are dead?
Well, I mean, it was a tough time, and it was survival for a lot of people. And you were a New Jersey boy, right? And I was literally in this Catholic school, closed neighborhood that didn't really, we just knew each other people. It was a time when you stayed in your neighborhood. You never left your neighborhood.
You didn't venture out,
and
that's for sure.
Out of nowhere, all of a sudden, I'm in this world that is so abstract. that I couldn't explain to anybody. And actually, Kathy and I sort of dressed for each time like this was our show, and we did head to toe. Well, you saw them all. I remember putting layers of pancake makeup on. Yeah. And how much makeup did I wear? It was like, I don't know what the heck. I had plaster of Paris on my face, and my hair was so sprayed that it could just stay under any conditions. It could rain, it could snow, I could sweat. That hair was not going to get touched.
It was great.
It was lacquered.
It was unbelievable. I mean,
and we dolled up. I mean, we really.
I remember Kathy was gorgeous.
Yes.
She was a little tiny, but she was gorgeous.
Yeah.
And I remember Connie too, but I don't know. She wasn't quite as much as you and Kathy were.
No. So Connie.
She was like a bodyguard.
Yeah. Connie, we met at Washington Irving, and Connie. So we were in the art class, and if you were in the art class, Washington Irving was all girls, and Washington Irving was tough then, as it is now,
today,
but it was tough. And so if you had a portfolio, it was like saying, come beat me up. Now, even though I was from this neighborhood, I was very athletic, and I was physical. I had a lot of strength, so I wasn't really afraid of anybody, but I just didn't get the deal that I should get beaten up every time I left school. And I remember one day somebody was coming up to me to kind of challenge me because I had my big portfolio. And this girl comes out of nowhere, and it's Connie. And she's from Little Italy, and you're not going to mess with Connie. And so she stops the girl and the girls and says, where are you going? What are you going to do? You got a problem? You got a problem with me? And she's doing this whole thing. And I'm looking at her like, where did my guardian angel come from? And she became really good friends with us. And she ended up being my bookkeeper when I opened my company.
That's right.
So
I forgot all about that. Oh, my God.
And she was outrageous. She went to places, and the stories she would tell me and the things she would do were so off the charts that I didn't even want to repeat them to myself because they were so
There's a great Seinfeld
outrageous.
episode. If I'm allowed to talk about Seinfeld, there's a Seinfeld episode where George is trying to collect unemployment, and the woman who could make the decision on his unemployment, he's sitting across from her, and he sees the picture of her daughter on the table. I hope you watched Seinfeld because
I did, but I don't know this.
So he says, "Is that your daughter?" And she says, "Yeah, you interested?" And he says, "I'd love to meet her." So they get fixed up. That daughter was Connie. Every time I see that episode, I think of her. And there's a scene where they're in the car. She's inviting him up. He won't go up because she's really not somebody you want to go up. And he says, I have an interview in a hardware store tomorrow for a job. He says, what are you going to do? You're going to give me screws? So she breaks up with George Costanza. Right. And, of course, he doesn't go on to collect his unemployment. That is Connie. Look for that episode.
Connie had a heart of gold, and she was just such a kind,
good
generous,
friend.
funny person. And my mother loved her. Connie would come like at 3 a.m, all whatever, and she would knock at the door, and my mother would like, come in, and I thought, what is in my mother's head that Connie can do no wrong and everything is right? I didn't understand, but Connie could come anytime to my mother's house and be totally welcome. And Connie was such a great help when we opened the business, because she really was kept kept check on the money and
That
how
was
it
on
was being
53rd
spent.
Street, right?
On 53rd Street, yeah. So I was really, she was just sort of this gift, this angel that came
Yeah.
into my life.
Gee, I wonder about Connie
Yeah.
and Kathy. I wonder how they're doing,
Well,
if they're doing.
well,
or what.
Connie passed.
Oh, she did?
Yeah,
Ah.
and so I just think there are people that are supposed to be in your life, and
Yeah.
you connect with them at a certain time, and there's such value to that. And with us, when I think about how important you are to me,
And you too.
part of it is you really are my living history. Like, I have these memories, but without you, they're memories that could sort of disappear, but you validate them the way I validate your experience in your existence, right? So it's a really special thing that you have with a friend, especially a friend
think,
for
yeah.
such a long time,
Yeah,
and
I
the
think so, too.
value of long time friendships.
Yeah, we've been, even with Billy, he
Mm-hmm.
was such a great kid, and I remember what a little wise guy he was, and how I wanted to just take him.
Right.
He's missed too. I mean, that was sad.
My brother was very funny.
Oh, God.
He had a
At
really
9, he was
yeah
funny.
he had an extremely smart sense of humor, and I remember he wrote a poem, and it was his first crush, and he wrote a poem about this crush, and it was about smoking a cigarette. He didn't even smoke it. He was like, smoking a cigarette, my heart is broken. And we saw the poem, and Connie and I read it, and we started laughing, and then he heard us. And so she quickly knew to kind of, intuitively, she was so kind, to kind of connect
Yeah.
with him, and he loved her so much too. And so she helped him through that first crush. But the poem was so deep and so, touching.
I was thinking about my first crush and how you helped me through my first crush when I got dumped. And but that's for
You
another.
had so many crushes. You
Yeah, but the one that was the major crush, the major crush. And I so milked it, the OCD of crushes I had. It was so nuts. And you were there for me. I remember Kennedy assassination. You and I was at your house.
Yes, that's
The day he got shot.
Yeah,
I came to your house.
Yeah.
And how dark the city was.
Yeah,
that day.
it was very sad. And I remember my brother was delivering meat for the butcher on a bicycle. And
Wow.
somebody just heard the news in their car on the radio, and they crashed into my brother, which then he, in turn, got this incredible amount of insurance money. So it was the first cash-in my brother had. Of course, it was against this horrible news, but that was such a traumatic
Yeah.
event, because up until then, there was a naivete about life. It was still a hangover from the 50s and
Yeah.
60s. It was pre.
That opened the door.
Yeah, it was before 65. So it was, what year did he die?
63, I believe it was
63. So it was everything was so almost naive about everything. But the hope that he gave people was just everything, and it was worldwide, and it was so heavy and dramatic, and it went to everybody's heart. So still today, if you travel, you still see pictures of Kennedy and the effect he had on people. And it was Martin Luther King, John Kennedy, and Gandhi. So I remember that trio as a part of the news of my childhood. Think about it. It was very inspiring. There were very powerful personalities who had new concepts and new thoughts and new behavioral ideas.
And they had Jackie Kennedy.
Yeah.
I mean, Martin Luther King that speech before he died. I may not get there with you, but
Yeah.
I know I'm going, oh my God.
Just seeing them, just hearing them and seeing them. I remember I was at Washington Irving, and I was the Union Square Park, and I was either going home or I don't know why I was out from school, and there was this stage in the park, and there weren't a lot of people around, and there were microphones and bullhorns being set up, and all of a sudden I see this man, and people started to gather, and I see this man, and I'm looking at him, and I never saw anybody like that. My neighborhood, people didn't wear suits unless it was a wedding or a funeral. And here he was in the most beautiful suit, and he was so handsome, and he had this hair that was just wow. And he started speaking, and I remember going right up front. I remember looking up at him, looking at his shoes, looking at the pant, everything, and thinking, who is this man? What's going on here? And hearing this accent that I'd never heard, because New York accents that's what I know. And hearing the sound of his voice, and then what he was saying, and thinking, oh my God, this man is just unbelievable. And it was Kennedy. Yeah. There he was. And I remember telling Caroline when I met her years later that that was such a bold moment for me in understanding the power of
the charisma, the magic.
That power.
Yeah, for sure.
And how he could change a belief system in a positive way. It was no negativity. There was just a feeling of euphoria.
And there was a calmness about his delivery. He was magic.
But then again, even with Martin Luther King, he was messaging profound stuff, but it wasn't provocative in a bad way. Yeah. It was uplifting, positive. Gandhi, again, powerful, uplifting. We were so fortunate to have that as the early impressions of what could be. And I crave that now for the generations that are the age I was when I first saw that.
I'm nervous for those generations.
Well, I'm not nervous for them. I think that there's a lot of really positive stuff that can be, but I think we are waiting for the next coming, and the next coming has to be a high level of integrity and of messaging that is positive and brings people together.
Yeah.
All three of those people had a purpose, and that was to bring people together. All three of those people were key, and because they were so radical, their lives were shortened by people who are afraid of that kind of energy.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's the sad thing.
Yeah.
That people who have a positive, uplifting message are really the most intimidating.
Yeah. Well, you can go back 2,000 years to when that was going on.
Yeah. So it shows you that, but we are long overdue for the next wave of that, and we are so lucky. You know, you and I are so lucky for so many things. So let's talk about drugs and alcohol, and and how peculiar it was, and just starting with 45th Street and everybody. And I didn't know about drugs really. I wasn't really sure. Later on, I thought, oh, so maybe it was marijuana that they were, but there was heroin, there was everything, and I had no idea what that culture was.
That area at that time was controlled by one particular crime family, and it was a very powerful crime family. And he had that control for many, many years. And he was not a drug organized crime figure, because a lot of the old timers, they didn't want to know about that because of what that was going to bring. And it was sort of like the younger generations that kind of brought that in because it was easy money. But all those young men and women that used to hang out in that little diner, I don't know if you remember.
Right, I do. What was the name of it?
The Knickerbocker.
Oh my God, that's right. It was the Knickerbocker Hotel.
Exactly.
Is that still there, I wonder?
No, that's gone. I don't know what's there now, but that's gone. But all of those guys were lost to drugs. And we lost one guy that we were both very fond of. It was very, very sad when that happened, because this guy had a magic about him too. He had that wonderful smile.
Yeah.
I'll never forget it. So, and alcohol, alcohol was so-so, but it was a lot of drugs. But who knew?
Yeah.
Sure, you take 2 of these pills, take this one.
But it wasn't a mainstream conversation.
No,
I mean, even to talk about pot or marijuana, I remember there were those films that.
Well, what was that one?
God.
I can tell you who was in it. The guy's name was O'Brien. His last name was O'Brien.
It was like nobody talked about it.
Yeah.
It was this underground thing, and there was a film about it that people talked about, but nothing. I mean, and even though 42nd Street was so near, and all of those peep shows and stuff like that were around, I still wasn't aware of porn. I didn't have a clue about what that was. I mean, naive was not a mild word for.
No, you were worse than me. I can tell you.
I really knew nothing.
Well, I remember Manny Gonzalez, and he had porno films, the black and white with the socks on. And we used to watch those things with popcorn. I mean, it was.
Oh my God! I don't think I knew about porn until the 70s. I had no idea what.
Look at it now.
But the innocence of the time was very special. But it also, it also created this sort of disguised sense of what was really going on, and the levels that, like, the nightlife, what happens at night. I was very aware of the fact that there were day people and there were night people, and the people we saw were night people, and they were like in their caves during the day, and daylight never hit them.
Never saw it.
Never saw it. They only came out at night, and they existed at night. And I found that fascinating, that you can actually live a life that way.
You know what I remember, Norma? I remember Lenny. Remember Lenny?
Right.
And he lived on West 88th Street. And I was living there with him at the time.
And Lenny was one of the dancers at the Peppermint Lounge.
At the Peppermint Lounge.
Yeah.
And then he used to design the costumes.
Yes.
And I remember this in terms of the AIDS epidemic and what happened with that. How Central Park West was like a center for men meeting men. And how that got completely wiped out, because of how many people got lost to that.
Well, the same with the West Village. I was living in the West Village in the 80s, and not only did I lose some very close friends, but the West Village was just street by street. You just saw people who were very sick and not having any hope for life.
Yeah, no care.
There were no cures, no nothing, and the numbers of people just walking down the street, and it was something. It was a plague.
For sure.
And in the West Village, that was the center of a gay community. That was where I was living, and I was overwhelmed. Sometimes I was just so overwhelmed. I would cry, and to know you have friends who tell you that they have AIDS, and they're basically telling you, I'm not going to see you anymore. was just so abstract.
Yeah, that was terrible.
And then there were people in the country who heard about it but didn't really experience it, because anybody who was gay left their town or were going to be open about what was happening to them, would leave that town and come to New York.
Do you remember at Lenny's house, we used to do parties there.
Mm-hmm.
He had a costume party one time. And there was a young dancer, Roger. I don't know if you remember Roger.
I remember Roger.
Okay. Roger was my first transvestite friend.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember the costume he came to the party in. Now, this is 1962?
Mm-hmm.
1962.
Brave.
He came as the Academy Award. He was naked. And he painted.
You
he
know
was
what?
painted
Why do I think I
you
remember
were probably
that? Yes,
at that party.
I remember that. He was so brave. He was really brave, and I think dancers. He was a dancer too,
yeah.
And I think dancers felt a camaraderie and a safe place together. So that's probably why he was braver in that setting. But if we go back to the 60s, nobody was gay.
Nobody.
Right? Nobody was gay. Supposedly, there was a period of time, and I tell people this, when I was in high school, even graduating high school, I would say till 1970 probably, or maybe a little earlier, where I didn't know what gay was. My mother, on the other hand, had gay friends.
Really?
She had gay friends, and they became more open as
time,
we got into the 70s.
Yeah.
But at the time, I remember her friends, these guys that were so much fun and so great, and they loved my mother, of course. And she was so ahead of her time in so many ways.
Right.
But these were her good friends. Even in the neighborhood, guys who were trying to keep it secret that they were, like, she was like that. They connected immediately. But growing up, we had no idea that there was any, what is gay? What does that mean?
My example of that is there were two guys that I met on West 45th Street. One guy's name, if I'm allowed to say the name, Jimmy Sisko, and another guy named Paul Lynn. Paul Lynn was they were both in Bye Bye Birdie, in the show Bye Bye Birdie, and on Broadway. And they were very friendly with Irene, who owned the hat check concession. They took me to a gay bar. This 64.
Oh, you're kidding.
And it was on East 53rd Street. And I'll never...
Oh, yes. Yes.
Okay, so I went in, and this was the first encounter I ever had with gay people. And there were two men kissing. I still have visions of that in my mind. I can still see that. But that was my first encounter with that community.
And it was so brave, seriously.
Oh, God, yeah.
For anybody to, I mean, think about it then and how hard it's been for people up till 10 years ago, 5 years ago.
3 years ago.
Can you imagine what it, and I keep relating it back to Mad Men time because it was such a rigid time. It was so hard for women. And anything women have gone through with objectification, gay men shared that.
Oh, yeah. Maybe even worse.
Like totally the objectification, exactly the same, the same intensity. And so that was such a difficult time because the gender thing was so specific. The power of that position of being male and anything that wasn't that was less than. And so for a gay man to say, I'm gonna come out, I'm gonna leave my hometown, come to New York and be me, or for a woman to decide that she was gonna be her own person. So in the 70s, it was still so early in that, and that's when that started to happen in the early 70s, which is then my story of, like, I'm going to do this on my own. In the 70s, how do you even think of a concept?
Yeah.
But the pain has to be so intense that you have to leave that hometown, you have to leave that marriage, you have to leave that environment and do it. Because if the pain wasn't that difficult, you would suffer with that secret or with that existence, and your self-esteem is just shot.
There's a song Rod Stewart made called "The Killing of Georgie Boy."
I don't remember
that. Oh
that.
yeah, and it's all about a young man who was gay, left home, and was involved in the Broadway scene. I think he was an actor, dancer, whatever. And he was attacked on East 53rd Street and 2nd Avenue.
This song is about that?
Yeah. Look for it if you
Oh
can.
my God.
You'll recognize
Oh my
it the minute you hear it. And that was the beginning. Not that it ended, but that was the beginning of the end. That's when there was a fed up.
Yeah.
In that community, they were fed up because
yeah.
it became such a story.
Yeah. So when we were talking about the movie Green Book.
I didn't see it, but yeah.
No, you saw it with the.
No, I didn't see it. It's on. He was a musician. He's driving in the car.
Yeah, but he talked about
the wagon wheel.
Going to the wagon wheel, and it was like. That was so good to hear because was all of that a memory that really didn't happen because it was so long ago? But here he's like, the wagon wheel. I was like, oh my God. And that character, yes, would have been at the wagon wheel.
Yeah, exactly.
He helps define sort of another layer
that
of
style.
What was going on at
absolutely.
the time. Yeah,
absolutely.
Definitely.
And I remember they all stayed in the Knickerbocker Hotel. I mean, it was just unbelievable, and to be, to sit on the outside watching that.
Right.
And we weren't really on the outside. We got in a little bit, but something always.
They were very kind, actually, by just not really pushing us into anything or whatever. Yeah.
You want to believe that they did that because they liked us?
I don't know why they did it.
Yeah, I don't know either, but...
they talked about us like we were specimens or like...
Yeah, I think they did. Vinny, don't go to jail. That's all I remember them telling me. Don't you ever go to jail, because if they get you in jail...
Oh, okay. I won't do that.
I remember one time there was a fight. Two sailors came up to me in the street, and they in front of the diner there. And all the boys are sitting inside and doing whatever they were doing. And I was standing outside, and they were asking directions. And I was telling them, yeah, you go down here. And as I'm talking to them, they started, they were making fun. I said, all right, you guys aren't interested. And they started this fight with me.
Oh, you're kidding?
Yeah, and they were going to beat me up. So now I get into the fight with these two guys. And I'm doing pretty good, And all of my friends are sitting in there watching.
You're kidding.
Nobody came outside.
Are you serious?
Yeah. And then I remember after, because I did okay, they all came out, and it was there was a great scene in The Goodfellas where the kid didn't squeal, and they were waiting for him out of the courthouse, and they were, oh, Vinny, you did great. I thought you were gay. That's what they all said.
That's very funny.
Yeah.
I think for that time, which really was just just an inch of time in our life, a slither. There were so many provocative moments, and I think, coming out the other end, all of those situations, and there were so many, and I was so naive through most of it that I don't think if I understood some of the nuances, it would have but I think about the teenage years in every person's life, and how when you think that your mother and your father don't know what they're doing, and you know everything.
I've had a few of those.
That's the beginning. That's the beginning of this period of time that is this very strange sort of lifetime experience that sets you up for how you're going to deal with life, and it's all intuitive. And I don't know how much of it is what your parents do or how they treat you or what you think about. I was a goody two-shoes. I did everything right. I was the top of my class. I worked hard. I got good grades. I was always good. And here I was in this environment that was everything but what a goody two-shoes should do. So how I somehow meandered through it, and my mother, and she was no dummy, my mother really had no idea of how close to very dangerous situations I came.
Yeah. No question.
Every time I was there.
She would have changed it to the radiator.
But she had no clue. And in the end, when I got grounded again, I realized that experience was something I could never tell her. And that would start this wedge of things I couldn't tell my mother. And so did you, like, what do you think, how did you get through that and still sort of come out?
I would never tell my mother anything. I mean, my mother was dangerous if I told her the things that I was doing. And I was not a goody two-shoes. I was a bad kid when I was growing up in the Bronx. I got arrested. I was stealing cars. I never went to school. I mean, got tattooed. I was 13 years old. I mean, I was not a good kid. But I remember the day I got caught. And I remember the night the police came to my house.
Oops.
And I remember that night my mother came out of the bedroom and my grandmother was there. And how scared I was. And that was for me, I think, a turning point.
Yeah.
Although you're always around dangerous situations. But I knew right then and there, I was never going to do anything like that ever again.
Yeah. And once you have that identity, I work with high school kids all the time, and you can either have the identity of this achiever who's always trying to get good grades, or the kid that's always in trouble, that's always having bad grades, that's always creating a problem. And what happens is you start to adapt that personality and make it true. You make you create a truth out of it. And I see that with kids so much, and I always say, break this truth. You can change your identity now. It will be so much harder after high school.
Yeah, it becomes a habit.
After high school,
you're doomed.
You're done. So
you really are.
My fixation with high school students is that there's a chance before they graduate, just like that chance, because I was in high school while we were doing this, there's a chance you can help a kid re-identify who they're going to be for life, no matter what the situation is.
Oh, God, what a gift to give a kid that.
And think about all the parents today who may be more indulgent than your mother and my mother, who believe that if you are friends with your kid, they'll tell you everything. And so I'm wondering, is that relationship better than what our parents did? For our parents basically said, this is the law, and the law wins. This is it. There's no compromise. If you don't like it, leave. Get out of the house if you don't like it. Parents now have a different relationship, but I can't believe teenagers still don't skirt, because you're young, you have no life experience, and now when you're away from your parents, you're with a group of people who can affect the whole rest of your life by what happens in those couple of years.
That was my biggest fear with my own kids. Wrong place at the wrong time. Mm-hmm. Get into an argument, push your friend, he hits his head on the curb. Then you're in prison. Mm-hmm. No, it's the idea to be look, somebody once said to me, if discipline is about you, it's not good discipline.
Right.
If it's about behavior, then it's a good discipline. And there is no bad discipline as long as it's not about you. You don't want to hurt your children. You don't want to, but to be their friend, you don't want to be their friend.
Yeah.
They don't want you to be their
Yeah.
friend.
No,
they want you to be
yeah.
their fathers and mothers.
Right, yeah. So I think this tradition of teenagers venturing into this world that parents don't really want to believe is happening. I think my mother, as smart as she was, there was a part of her that wanted to believe that you were the worst case scenario.
Yeah.
And that there was nothing else. And I think parents today feel the same, that they don't want to believe the worst case, but in fact, it's inevitable that a child who is just tied to their parents and now is experiencing a world that is very unprotected is definitely going to be venturing into some unknown territory. And the only hope is that they come out the other end unscathed.
I can remember my son Luke telling me some of the things that were going on in his private school that I was stunned. I could never believe that 11-year-old
But
kids.
what did you do? What could you do about
Well,
it?
there's nothing you can do but try to be an example for him. You can't look, kids. I think a lot of parents don't know what to do. You know, when you started to see kids' faces on milk cartons, every parent was taking their kid to school. But did your mother take you to school when you were 12 years? No. You got a boot in the ass and said, get off to school and you're going to be late. But I took my kids to school because that whole thing that they pushed in your face when Eton Pates was kidnapped on his way to school. You become so frightened of anything happens to your kids, what happens. But I told Luke, my disciplining you is not about you. My disciplining in you is more to protect me, because what happens to me if something happens to you? I'm done. I'm dead. Wipe it down. It's over. So he really understood that, and I think he respected it. I know he did it, and Christian too. All of my kids, they did things that.
It's good that you don't know.
No, it's better that you don't know.
Yeah. And so talking about coming out the other end, so then if we fast forward a little bit into the 70s, I remember taking TM, and you're up in India meditating and oming
standing on my head.
Standing on your head. And so here we are in one world, and now we've transported into something that was actually more our personalities, right?
For sure.
And so the 70s were really an attempt at peace and love and all of that. And we actually floated through that nicely.
Yeah,
I mean,
very nicely.
it was such a relief to feel connected again, until I remember being in the store and this guy coming in, and everybody thought, again, another drug time, but a different kind of, it was a mellower kind of thing. And I remember everybody, the way I looked and the way I dressed, and I think I shaved my eyebrows at that point. So I looked like I was on something. And so I didn't even deny it if people thought I was stoned. I didn't say, no. I'm like, So this guy came into the store and he said, would you like some candy from Pakistan? And I said, oh my God, yeah, of course. How cool is that? Candy from Pakistan. I'm thinking it's candy. And he has this big piece of tin foil. It's like a block covered with tin foil. And he's unpeeling the tin foil, and there's all this brown gunky stuff. And I said, that doesn't look like candy.
Is that chocolate?
And he looked at me, and he immediately knew, I'm going to put this away. This girl's so lost. And I remember floating through that period of time like you, where you just didn't talk about the fact that you weren't stoned because everybody else was stoned.
And they all thought you were stoned anyway.
Absolutely. And because it was better if you were too, they would feel more
Well, remember,
comfortable.
I was in the center of that world because
Yes,
I
you
was
were.
working in the clubs.
Yes, you were.
And I can remember the trips, not with me, but I remember this march back and forth to the men's
Yeah.
room. I think, what the hell? What's going on in there? You open, you stick your head in, and all you hear is. No, no. Those were,
And we would touch base.
yeah,
Like
in and out, right?
Like you're the other person that isn't getting stoned. I don't think I knew anybody else. I really, I think
no,
about,
yeah.
I didn't know anybody else that wasn't getting stoned. And it was a little scary, but as long as I didn't talk about it, nobody would question me.
She's hip. I'm hip.
Yeah, like we looked like we fit in, but we were really so different. But there was a very peaceful, sort of calming time, and it was so baby boomer. It was so expressive and typical of what our generation is about. And coming from being bound up in garter belts and girdles and all of that paraphernalia too, I don't think I wore a bra or underpants through the entire 70s. I was like so free. I was not gonna do that.
Yeah.
I hated that the cone bras and oh my God.
The message.
Yeah.
Well, let's see. I could go through the list of clubs that I was working in back in those days. My goodness. And I mean, Salvation was to me the epitome of what you're talking about here. This sort of like peace, love, and rock and roll. And that was right on Sheridan Square. And
what kind of music was being played?
well, it was the Doors. It was the Buffalo Springfield. I remember Terry Noel was the DJ there. And he was the DJ in Arthur when Arthur was on, I guess it was on where the hippopotamus ended up. And
all I can remember about that was Frank Sinatra and Mia Farrow being at the bar and seeing Paul Newman with his like these incredible blue eyes, and he was so little. He was like
short.
a little bit,
very small.
just a little taller than I am, and thinking, oh my God, the reality of seeing these people in person really puts everything in perspective.
Yeah, they're not on the big screen.
Yeah, it's bigger than life is not. But those clubs were also so much a comment about the new freedoms we were having. It's not, clubs are almost tired now, and they're not connecting people in the same way. Of course, everything has to compete with your mobile device, but there was such a great energy in connecting with people and interacting in a way that no generation before had done. It was quite different and very free. And then obviously culminating in Studio 54, where it was sort of like leading up to this total abandoned freedom that then, set everything else in motion for what was going to come after that. But true baby boomer influence through that period.
Well, I remember Salvation, Bradley, the guy who I went to work for there, and Mike Washi was on the door, who just passed away. And I remember Brad had no interest in making money. He just wanted the love.
Yeah.
That was all he wanted to do, and he expressed it. And everyone who came in there, it didn't matter who they were, they experienced exactly what, but it was the drugs that destroyed that sensibility.
And what was really popular then too? Comedy clubs.
Yeah.
We used to, I remember we'd work, and then everybody after work, we would go to all the comedy clubs.
The Improv?
And the Improv and the Comedy Club, and there were so many good ones. And all of these great comedians were
Richie Pryor.
Yeah, they were all getting their starting off and experimenting. And we did so much laughing in the 70s too. I think probably the best note to end this on is that the 70s for me are a memory of a lot of laughter, a lot of positive, optimistic feeling of joy and happiness and love, and really, but spiritually believing it and feeling good about it. And we've come to a point now where we're not laughing anymore. We're not positive. We're very tightly wound.
Yeah.
And I think now more than ever, we need some brilliant comedians. And I think, Jerry Seinfeld is one of these guys who transcends time. I heard some of his comedy bits on Netflix that he did in the 70s. They repeated, they put together, he did all of his bits from the 70s in one Netflix show. And it was timeless humor that was still so funny. And people like that genius, there's a real genius there. You quoted right just his show, and so there are people like him that have a kindness to them and a humor that's so brilliant and intelligent, and you have to be very smart to do that. So I'm ending this with the plea for wherever there are comedians who are going to make us laugh and be brilliant. We miss you, we need you, and it would be a beautiful thing. And Vinny, thank you so much. I'm so happy you agreed to do this.
It's my pleasure.
My
I love this.
pleasure.
And then we'll do it again tomorrow.
Okay.